For our program, we'll have Margie Castle, who's our new member, who's just stepping in to be my assistant, and she's been helping me with everything. So, Margie, you can.
Okay, hi, I'm Margie Castle, and thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited today to talk about the joy of art stewardship. And stewardship is a kind of a common phrase, and we're thinking about art stewardship of mostly the stewardship of the painting, the work that we've done. But I'd also like you to think today about the art stewardship or the heart of the artist, because that stewardship is also very important. And we've got a lot of stewards here today. I'll just mention one, of course, is Sharon. She's the steward of, she's the art steward of the society now, and she's done a great job bringing everybody together and great new ideas. We've got, of course, Lynn back there that's doing the technical work. So she's an art steward with her talents. I've got to, of course, mention Tina because she did a great job on the newsletter. And I also know she's being a really good art student with a granddaughter. She's teaching her granddaughter to paint. So I think that's really lovely. And Pam, of course, Pam and Vina with all the exhibitions that you're doing. And and Carla, you're new too. You're fairly new, I think. But I think and the others, I don't know you yet. It's kind of like the Michael Bublé song, just don't know you yet. So when I get to know you better, I'll be able to share a little more information about you. But I'm a Southern California girl, grew up in Newport Beach, Anaheim and Newport Beach. I lived in Canada for 41 years. My late husband was Canadian, so I was very fortunate. Oh, good. There we go. I was very fortunate to have a great life in television and newspaper up in Canada. And I lived in Toronto and traveled all across the country. So I'm very, very close to the Canadian families. I still have some family there, lots of friends. So I know it's a difficult time right now. Things are shaking a little bit and people are a little nervous about things. So I don't think there's a better time to talk about art and the joy of art and the joy of being an artist. And I'll just tell you a little bit about how I got started. My mom said that I was born with these two things, a paintbrush and a pencil, because I sketched everything. I think from the time I could walk, I was sketching doorknobs, my brother's roller skates, basketball hoops, just about anything that you could possibly sketch. But what I really loved was sketching flowers. In my early days, I really wanted to just sketch flowers. Now, my house, I had two older brothers. What we had in our yard was a basketball hoop and one orange tree. My family had moved to Southern California or to Anaheim just after the war. And it was a tough time, 3 kids in a new house. So there wasn't a lot of money for art supplies. So I'm very proud to say that this pencil is a carpenter's pencil. And my grandfather was a master carpenter from Sweden. And I think they were the first recyclers in America because my dad wouldn't let me use the school pencils for sketching. So my grandfather, this was my Christmas present every year. I got a box of sharpened pencils because I also wasn't allowed to use the knife. So these were my pencils. And my grandmother, bless her little heart, let me get on this side. I used so much paper in the house. My parents just said, we just can't buy you any more paper. So my grandmother came up with this idea. This is a ring of old things. They were church bulletins, they were envelopes, they were bills, the backs of bills, they were backs of greeting cards. And so this is what I really learned what to paint on. And oh, thank you. Oh yeah, I'm not going to get rid of anything. So that's what I really learned to paint on. So for Christmas, this was in my Christmas box. I'd have a dozen or so of these. And so they were early recyclers, very frugal. So I truly appreciate anybody who's doing work on different kinds of paper. You know, it always doesn't have to be the smooth paper that you're talking about. It can be all kinds of things. And I used to have tape on these, whatever I needed to do, but this was my Christmas present. So at my house, all we really had, as I say, on the front yard was an orange tree. I painted that orange tree from the top to the bottom, underneath leaves, every time the blooms would come. But across the street was the most beautiful garden you can ever imagine. It was spectacular. It rivaled Walt Disney's gardens. And so one day I got very bold and I took my little, ring of paper, went across the street, sat down on the sidewalk and decided I was going to draw this garden. And I was very serious in my work, and out comes from the front door the most, hi, come on in, the most wonderful vision I'd ever seen. This absolutely wonderful British woman, completely decked out in a floral dress. I mean, you think this is floral? She was completely floral. So she comes out and she says in her very strong British accent, she says, "Oh, you're the little girl across the street." And I said, "Oh, yes, I am." And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I really love your flowers, and if you don't mind, I'd like to sketch your flowers." She said, "That would be lovely." So she stood up. I'd never seen anybody do this. She stood up and she said, "I'm Mrs. Daisy Whittington." And very British. So I didn't know what to do. So I kind of jumped up and I said, "I'm Margaret Ann Highsmith." And for some reason, I put my hand over my heart like I was supposed to give her some salute or something. But anyway, she said that she was an artist and would I like to come in and see her art studio? And I said, "Oh, I would love to, but give me a minute," because my parents wouldn't let me go in someone else's house, if you didn't know them. So I ran across the street. My mom said, "Sure." We opened the door. I was in heaven. This is where I wanted to die, and I was only 8. And her whole house was so beautiful. She had tiny watercolors. She had giant watercolors. She had frames that were thick and bolsterous. She had little things leaning against lamps. She had just the most beautiful watercolor work I'd ever seen. And she said, "Would you like to see my studio?" Oh, of course. So going to her studio, I wanted to go home and take out my bed and turn my room into this art studio. She had beautiful things all around it, and it was so light and bright. And I noticed that she had a beautiful long table with white oilcloth on it. And this is where she had all her paints. And I'm looking at her paints. I'm thinking of my paints. I had like the primary colors. I'm looking at her paints. She had colors like citrus and aubergine and mountain blue and dark sea green. She must have had 50 color of paints that I'd never seen before. So I was in heaven. So she asked if I'd like to take lessons from her. Well, of course I would. And I said, but I told her my parents couldn't pay. I said, but I'd be happy to weed your garden or do something. And she said, "Let me give you my phone number." So she gave me one of the most beautiful, and I still have it, one of the most beautiful bookmarks. And she wrote her name and number on the back and said, "I'll have your mom call me." So my mom called her, and the lady was so sweet. Mrs. Whittington, pardon me, not the lady. She was so sweet, Mrs. Daisy Whittington. And she was so sweet. And she told my mother that I was enchanting and very interesting. So she would be happy to, have me come as a student. Well, it was the most wonderful experience. So in the summer, every Wednesday, and this was her phrase, precisely at 2:00, precisely at 2, we would have 1 hour together. From 2:00 to 10 after 2, we would have demonstration. From the next 20 minutes would be painting. The next 10 minutes would be critiquing, which is what we're going to talk about today mostly, critiquing. And the next 20 minutes would be tea. So I not only got a lesson in art and painting and respect and stewardship, I got a lesson in how to make proper tea. And this is what her dress looked like. All of them. Everything. In fact, her bathroom looked like this. They even wallpapered the ceilings of the bathrooms. So anyway, my first class, I walk in and she has a little table like this right next to hers, white oilcloth, just beautiful. She had the primary colors. I wasn't too thrilled about that, but I thought I'd get a little more, something more exciting. But she had the primary colors. She had beautiful brushes. The paper was just perfect. She had a still life for us to do. And so right precisely, oh, I got there at 10 to 2. Precisely at 2 o'clock, bing, she started doing her demonstration. I'm overwhelmed. I'm so excited. So now it's my turn. Of course, I spill the water. You know, the first thing I do is spill something, and I still do. So I'm cleaning that up. That's 5 minutes, you know. So now my paint time is messed up. But nonetheless, all of a sudden now it's 2:30. It's time to critique. And I was so, well, first I was nervous, but I was thrilled because she was going to tell me, you know, how awful I did. And so I said to her, do you mind if I do yours first? So I go over and I start to put my hand on her painting. And she said, oh, no, 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 no. And just like the queen, I mean, just now, I thought I'd suddenly come and hurt me because I was going to touch it. But she said, I want to tell you the first lesson of good art stewardship is to never touch someone's painting. So you have a little handout here. And now I didn't do this back then, but these are kind of the lessons I learned. And it's called Hey, Look Me Over, 5 reasons why you should not touch original watercolor paintings. So this was my first lesson. So that took an extra 5 minutes. Now I only had 15 minutes for tea. So I really kind of messed up the first class, but she was so careful and gentle and respectful about whose artwork you were going to touch. And what she also had, of course, were, which, everybody have gloves? White gloves. Let me put them on. I mean, it was an awesome event. So she had white gloves, cotton gloves, white cotton gloves, just like this. And so she would now start to talk about the art. And with my painting, the same thing, not so great, but but that was okay. I did get better. But she was very respectful of the art. And she said, whatever you do, however long you paint, respect the art. So I was so excited. All summer long, from 2 to 3 on Wednesday afternoons, I would be with Mrs. Daisy Whittington. Well, by the end of the summer, I got pretty cocky. I thought, I think I can teach. So I'm pretty good I think I'm going to be good at this. So I decided to send out invitations to my neighborhood, handwritten. I spelled precisely incorrectly because I wanted them precisely at 2 o'clock on the Saturday, whatever the Saturday date was. Sent them all out. And the big deal was that I put my phone number on it. And if you were 8 or 9, I don't know about when you grew up, but I didn't get a lot of phone calls at 8 or 9. And I thought I was going to have 25 phone calls. This is so exciting. You know, I get to be on the phone. Phone didn't ring. No response. Finally, 2 days before my art class that I was teaching, I got 2 calls. One was from Candy, a very good girlfriend of mine, and she was coming. And my other friend, Linda, she called, but the only way she could come is if her very annoying little sister, who was 3, could come. And I'm sorry to say annoying, but she was. And I said, okay. So I expected I was going to have this big table. Well, I ended up with 2 card tables, just like this. And I set it up just like Mrs. Whittington did. I did not have white oilcloth. I had plastic Christmas tablecloth, was on one table, and an Easter tablecloth on the other one. So it didn't look quite as elegant, but I set it out just exactly like Mrs. Whittington. And I asked Mrs. Whittington to come at 2:30 if she would come and critique the work, which she agreed to do. So we're all set up. The girls are there. We're painting. We're having a great time. I've got the egg timer, my grandma's egg timer, going, and bing, 10 minutes demonstration. Bing, 20 minutes of painting, and exactly at 28 after 2, I see Mrs. Daisy Whittington coming across from across the street. She looked like the Queen of England. She had a hat on, for goodness sakes. She had baby blue gloves on. So this was a pretty big, and her dress, well, I don't need to tell you. She looked like a walking, flower pot. But anyway, so I see her and I'm so excited, but I look at the table and I said, oh my God, I don't have the gloves. So I was lucky because my father's, and I think I told Sharon this, my father's cousin was the glove buyer for Bullocks. And she traveled all over the world. And so the sample sizes were a size 5. And so she had no daughter, so I got all of her gloves. And these were not $5 gloves, $55 gloves. This is 1958, so these were pretty serious gloves. So anyway, I had all these gloves in my hope chest, ran to the bedroom, opened it up, grabbed 4 pair of gloves, came back, just put them in front of everything. Well, I didn't look to see what kind of gloves they were, but so Mrs. Whittington comes in. She looks at the art. She says, well, ladies, and she changes her blue gloves to her white gloves. And of course, the girls, they're all looking. I say, yes, put your gloves on. Well, my gloves that I got, they were gorgeous. They were white suede with cutouts right about here. They were so pretty. And then Linda's gloves, you're laughing, it was hysterical. And Linda, the next pair of gloves, she had, they were like almost white suede, but back in the day when they were handmade, they would sew the seams on top of, do you know that kind? Of each of the gloves. So she had those. And then her little sister, oh my God, I don't know how I got these gloves, but she got, what do you call it, elbow length gloves, white, with black satin thing. When she put those on, she looked like she really was wearing nurse's stockings. I mean, she just looked hysterical. So my mother took a picture. Unfortunately, not her, best thing to do, but nonetheless, she took it facing the sun, and there we were all holding our artwork. And it was so wonderful. And then we went, my mother was very kind to say we could have tea. And now Mrs. Whittington had these wonderful, very hard cookies from Marks and Spencer. Does anybody know Marks and Spencer? They were lovely tea cookies. Well, and we had just cookies from Vaughn's. And then I wasn't allowed to pour tea, so we had iced tea in beautiful cups. But that was my first art teacher, and taught me how important it was to really respect somebody else's art. And what I brought just a few things today to tell you about my personal experience with people touching art. So I'm going to put my gloves on. Everybody gets gloves. Now, if you take extra pair if you like. Take extra pair if you like. If you already have gloves and don't need them, please take them and pass them forward to someone that you know, and just give them the idea of the importance of wearing gloves or not touching other people's artwork. So let's put on our gloves. Oh, there we go. See? And they're unisex, so no problem. Aren't they cozy? I know, they're so cozy. So just as artists, we're curious. How did you do that? You'll think people, or how did they do that? How did they make this? What did they add on to that to make that high? To give it some relief. Well, what you don't want to see is people going, how did they do that? And that's what happened right here. I saw the person, how did they do that? And they were scratching. Now, even when you have a sealer on, sometimes if someone is being pretty harsh with something, it can still come off. But anyway, so I'm just recommending if you go someplace and you want to know how somebody did it. I know you're all professionals, and you wouldn't do that, right? Has anybody touched anything? Well, I have, and I'm sorry that I did. Now this was an interesting piece because this was just on a little grid, kind of like that. And a lady, I heard her say to her husband, "Oh, could you make me a frame like that?" Well, so he did this. He took it off the grid. He put his hand just like that and turned it around to see how it was built. And of course, when he took his hands off, I don't know what he had on. I didn't want to know what he had on his hands. But anyway, it went on to the painting. Now, normally, sure, we can clean paintings, but that's not what we want to do. We finished it, and then if you just use water, do you use cotton? What's the best way to take care of that? I really wasn't happy about it, but now this one, the original was a 24 by 24. And so what I did, sometimes it's fun. There's a great company called canvasdiscount.com. And you can get all kinds of, your art blown up in canvas, all kinds of acrylic. And so this was a cute little acrylic thing. I thought it would be fun to make. Well, this is what happened to this one. I'll take my ring finger off. So this is on there like that. And the gal comes up and let me show you, I'll speak loud. "Oh, I wonder if this is glass or acrylic." With her, yes. And so I don't know if you've ever touched glass or acrylic or tapped it to make sure what it was. And she did her ring to see if it was glass or acrylic. Just saying. Oh, yeah. So now on the other one, this card works in so many ways. So this was a painting that was a much larger painting. This is square, and the painting was much larger. And I took it to a nice little framer, and she said, "Oh, I'd be happy to do it," which she did. But when I got it, it was the strangest thing. Over here were 2 red dots and an orange smudge. And she had framed it so I looked at that. I said, "Oh my gosh." I always take a picture before I take it to the framer. And I said, "Gosh, what is that?" And she says, "I don't know." So I said, "Did you frame it?" She said, "No, my assistant did." Well, we found out what it was. There was a red pen on the framing table, and that put the 2 little dots on it. There was also a bag of Cheetos on the framing table that apparently, and I've cut it down, but was apparently on it as well. So there were Cheetos on my thing. So you can imagine. So when you're getting things framed, just ask them if they wouldn't mind to wear gloves, which I always bring a pair of gloves to framers if required. And then, please make sure it's clean. It's cleaned up. So has anybody ever else had any of their work touched? No issues? Well, I guess lucky me. Well, and there's just one more little story I'd like to tell you, I don't have the lady's name that I'm going to talk about, but she was about 95 years old, and this was on the Isle of Capri. My late husband and I traveled all over the world, and very fortunately, I would take cooking workshops, which I love cooking, and of course, painting workshops all over the world. And one of my favorite things are lemons. So I went to the Isle of Capri and had a 3-day workshop on cooking everything with lemons. It was magnificent. And I also had an art workshop. Well, at the Saturday morning, the boat is coming to pick us up. Brian and I are at a really sweet little piazza restaurant there, just totally enjoying ourselves. He's having an espresso. I've got does anybody have one of these? I'll just show you. Your little travel, cute little things like this. But I take that everywhere with me, and just a small little pad like that. So if you have an extra hour, as I said, I was used to, sketching skates, for goodness sake. So I was very pleased. And what I was sketching, now this was just a little quick sketch, but what I was sketching was the bay there in Capri that the boat was coming to see. So as I'm painting, sitting there, I see a man and woman walking over, and I could tell she was laboring with her walk. She had her black, remember those black heavy leather bags with the gold clips on them that our grandmothers and mothers used to carry? And you could hear it when the clip would open. You know, you knew something exciting or awful was going to happen. And so she came over and she was just looking, and she's speaking to him in Italian, and she starts to cry. And I said, "Oh, is everything okay?" And he said, "Oh, yes." He said she was an artist. And when I looked at her, and he said she had very severe arthritis. And I could understand. Her hands were gnarled. And I must say, I'm starting. My grandma used to call these ornaments, rather than arthritis. So I have ornaments. But this lovely woman, just little quiet tears going down her face. And that she used to paint right at that spot with her husband, having the espresso coffee, and exactly the same view that I was painting. Well, of course, now I'm crying, and Brian's getting emotional. Everybody's emotional. And so anyway, I said to her, I said, "I would love for you to have this painting. Please, I would like you to have this painting." And her son's telling her what's going on, and she said, "Oh, I couldn't take it." And I said, "No, please, it's really important for me for you to have this painting." And she finally, she said yes. And her son starts to go to pick up the painting, just like this, and she slapped him on the hand because he was going to grab the painting like the other guy that grabbed it, like, who knew what he had on there? He might have had a muffin or something. So he grabbed it, she slapped his hand. And she's speaking to him. And then she did something that was very dear to my heart. And I'm going to show you, express it. Can you hear me? Yeah. So she had her black bag, and she opened it with that gold clip, that snap that you could hear. And it was just like my grandmother being there. And out of her bag, she takes these two hankies, just very, very similar to this. Now, in my Irish family, my grandmother always carried two hankies, one for herself and one for a friend, depending, if you meet somebody that has a stuffy nose or something, needs to wipe the lipstick, whatever. So she took this hanky, and her hands were so gnarled, but she was so cautious. And she took this hanky. And actually, my grandma and I used to make these hankies. She did the tatting, and I did the sewing. But she put this so carefully. Talk about being a wonderful art steward and being respectful of art. This was not a great painting. It was just a quick sketch. But she put it down. She wrapped it up just like that. And she put it in her bag. And she and snapped the bag closed. And I said to her son, I said, "Oh, she forgot her other hanky." And she said something to him, and she said, "No, she's my new friend." Well, now I'm bawling my eyes, I'm crying, Brian's going. So now she took it home, and I had this beautiful hanky. Now it's not this one, but I gave it to a very dear English friend of mine who was getting married about 10 years ago as her something old, because it was beautifully done. And so here's kind of the story of art stewards. No matter where you live, no matter how old you are, no matter where you are in your art journey, we can be great art stewards with each other and our friends and our family. And I thank you, and I hope you've enjoyed. I don't have any hankies for you. I'm so sorry. Maybe next time. Or you're all good? Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Arts room, and there were some paintings on the wall, and they were black, and they had all this texture on them. And she said, "These are done by a blind artist, and he paints with foam, and he puts like really heavy acrylic over it, so that but you're supposed to touch that stuff,
yes,
because that is what he sees.
Yes,
so that's how he does it.
Yes, yeah, which I think is wonderful. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, those are all for you.
You want to get it?
There's more.